right, we're live.
My name is Bob Silverman, and I am this week's moderator slash host of our Uncut Thread series that we'll be doing through Quilt Africa. Each week there will be a different moderator, a different topic. It could be a discussion, a panel, a debate. We'll have all kinds of different topics and things coming up. Today we will be talking about how quilts are judged at quilt shows. And we have some questions we'll be asking our panel. But before we get into that, let me introduce my panel. We have first my dear friend Anita Jones from back in my New York days is joining us today. My little sister Barbara Dantzler is joining us today from Savannah. And my new friend Shirley Petaway Green is joining us today from Tampa, Florida. So it should be very interesting. We'll have diverse opinions, diverse views. We may agree, we may not agree, but that's what this is all about, just to discuss. Before we get into it, I printed out what are general rules that most guilds or juried shows follow for the most part. So I'm just going to read this, and then I will ask our panel some questions. So to enter a quilt show generally, originality is important. The quilt must be the entrant's own original work, and any collaborations must be clearly stated with all the quilt makers credited. The completion date, they generally like to have the quilt completed within a specified time frame. Generally, it lasts 1 to 3 years or so. Construction, a minimum of 3 layers. Every quilt has a top, batting in the middle, and a backing, joined by stitching. Some rules may have exceptions for specific styles like crazy quilt, which can be tied or quilted. Finished edges, the quilt must have a finished edge, such as a binding or facing. And category compliance, the quilt must fit the specific category it is entered into, which may involve size restrictions or other technical requirements. The judging criteria generally is along A, craftsmanship. Judges assess technical skill, looking for elements like straight lines, consistent stitch length, sharp corners, flat seams, and even binding. Design and color, factors like color composition, design originality, and overall visual impact are evaluated. And then finishing, judges evaluate how the quilt is finished, paying close attention to details like the binding, corners, and overall presentation. Execution, the overall execution is judged, and sometimes originality and eye-catching design can elevate a quilt beyond just its technical skill. So that's just a very general guideline that you will find most guilds and most shows will follow. So what we would like to talk about today is, first, I would ask, who should have the final say on what constitutes a best in show quilt? Technicians, artists, or the community? And I will open it up to the panel. Whoever would like to go first and address that, we'll discuss that first.
Well, I'll go first.
Okay.
I think it really depends on the type of show, who should have the final show. Because I believe that the IQS shows, Paducah, the Quilt Festival, and I'm not so sure about the, I'm talking about the really big shows, and the quilt show in Birmingham. I think they lean more towards what quilting was before. And so I think that probably technique and using the technique may be kind of novel and eye-catching and all that. So that might be, but in the modern guild, innovation trumps technique. Because one of the things, if you read the rules, and I read the rules really carefully, except for one part I didn't read carefully, and I found that out when I was entering. But because one of the quilts I was going to enter too, and then when I looked at it closely, I discarded it because it was improv and I'd cut up too much stuff and some seams were loose. But modern quilting, the jury to get in, the juror, will overlook a mistake if it does not detract, and it's in the rules, and it does, if it does not detract from the design. But I think the, I'm going to try not to put my bias in here, but I think the more, I'm not a traditional quilter, let me say it up front. The more traditional shows, technique is like really big. That's like a 20 out of 10. So that's my answer to that question.
All right. Before we continue, I just want to say that when I started quilting, and when I had my quilt shop, and when I started judging quilt shows, most of the people in my area followed the National Quilting Association rules. The National Quilting Association does not exist anymore. They have closed, I think, in 2018, but a lot of people still follow those rules. And it was a point system. So you were handed a sheet, and it literally said like technical skill, finishing, da 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 da, and you gave it, I think it was 1 through 10, and you just checked your little mark what you thought. They totaled the points, because when I first went to a quilt show and I said, how can there be 5 first place quilts? I assumed somebody won first place and that would be it. But they said, no, it's a point system, so we can have several first, second place, and so on. So that was interesting to me and eye-opening as well. But I don't know that all of those rules are still as applicable, because we have a lot more improv and art quilting. So that's my 2 cents for now, but who'd like to go next?
Let me ask, being the newbie, the newbie, and I don't think I'm going to compete. I don't know. I've done one thing. So as I understand, because you were talking about best in show. So best in show means sort of like I equate it to the AKC and the dog things, when you got each dog in their breed and they compete and become number one in their dog breed, and then you put them all together and all the different breeds, one gets best in show overall. So if I'm understanding this correctly, the quilts, or at least today's quilts, they have different categories for the types of quilts. So, you got some that may have a theme, maybe portraits, maybe traditional. Am I correct, right?
Yes.
And so then those are judged by their jury and their specialties in that area. And then they take those winners out of those categories and put them together and decide who's best in show overall. Is that kind of what we're talking about, right?
Shorter. Best in show can be, there are different ways that it's done. Best in show can be when you go to a quilt show and you vote. Everybody who attends the quilt show can vote for what they think is best in show, regardless of where it came from or category. Then they also have, like when I've judged quilt shows, I get a little ribbon that says judge's choice. So I picked my favorite, regardless of everything else. And I have done that, picked ones that didn't win any ribbons, but I liked it, so I picked it. And then they have, I think what Shirley was referring to, like a jury, like literally a jury that judges, that discounts the public that's viewing the show.
Right. And also you have sometimes viewer's choice, which discounts everything that the judges have said.
Right, right.
Been quilting forever, and I entered a garment in a quilt show and got best of show because it came under, as Bob said, the time when NQA was, they were the judges. And so it was the point system. And my jacket met all the points.
Okay.
It was not a quilt. So there was a lot of turmoil about that, but I still have my best in show ribbon.
There you go.
But in today's quilts, the idea of submitting a quilt, and yes, you should, because it really is a learning thing. It's nice to have somebody else critique your quilt. I like to do it because otherwise it's my husband who's critiquing my quilt, and that's tiresome. So you grow with those critiques. So I would never not submit something.
I will agree with Anita very much there. When I forgot that part about when I've judged shows, I'm allowed to make comments. First of all, Barbara, they cover the name. So I don't know who made the quilt, because if it's a local show, I shouldn't be swayed by whether I know the person or not. So they generally cover that up. So all I'm looking at is the actual quilt. And on some, I could tell that the technical skill was somewhat lacking, but the enthusiasm was there and they had the guts to enter it in the show. So any criticism I had was very, very kind. It was never mean. It was never pointed. It was more like, I found when I do my corners, blah, 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 in a nice way to encourage them to improve in that area. So it would be helpful, even though it might sting a little bit, but it's meant well.
Yeah, I reviewed some of the that criteria, some of what you read off when we started. And there's a lot of little things that I hadn't even thought about when quilting to look at on my own quilt, like when it comes to the binding. And I'm like, oh, they actually, they're looking at that. That's part of the criteria. And I thought, oh, Lord, I need to improve my binding because, like the work I hate doing bindings. I absolutely hate doing it. It's like the finishing, and it's the worst part of the whole thing for me. But I thought about that, which made me become more aware in my mind. Okay, yeah, let's make that binding this way, a little tighter, a little smoother, and so forth. So, and so I guess when you're looking at that, you're looking at that overall, that the technique, the stitching, the lining, and all that. But how do you decide best in show when you've got all these quilts that hopefully, have been reviewed and juried and meets at least at a minimum the criteria, right?
Right.
So now who's deciding who? Okay, and I know there's, like Shirley was saying, there are different levels of competition. Like the little one that I entered was a local one through the churches thing, and surprisingly I won. I can't believe I won, but I won.
There you go.
But it wasn't people that quilt judging. It was more so of oh, that's a beautiful piece, and they didn't look at the way I looked at it, because knowing what it should look like. So it was more of an overall aesthetic thing. It was, the look that a consumer would look at it. And so it was a different type of judging, I guess you would say. And so that, if the consumers or the public is viewing and they're not quilters, they're going to look at that quilt totally different than if a technician or somebody who has a vast experience or as a judge is going to look at it to determine best in show and so forth. So I think but I agree with Shirley. It depends on the venue, I guess. When you say,
well, yes, and because before I entered an actual quilt show, the modern guild that I was in, I'm in 3 modern guilds, a local guild and then a guild in South Florida and one in Illinois. Well, before I did, every year we had a place where we exhibited our quilts. We exhibited our quilts in Mancuso one year when it was in Tampa, and then we always do the Sewing Expo. And then as a way of recruiting members, we ask them to vote on the quilt. We give them what the challenge was that's posted there. And then all the people in the guild who completed a quilt, they know their quilt's going to hang. And the first time I did, I was so proud. It hung in the convention center. I was so happy because I just started quilting. I've been sewing forever. And I was excited about it. I didn't really care if I won or not, but I stopped doing it because one year I was working the show and I heard the lady say, oh, I'm going to vote for the yellow one because yellow is my favorite color. And I was like, this lady didn't even read what the person was supposed to do. And one of my friends I have a lot of the people in the guild, because I suffer from imposter syndrome, which is rampant in the quilt community. Even people who are teachers have it. And I found that out. And I was thinking, I'm not putting a bunch of effort and having somebody win because they like the yellow one or the blue one, and the quilt didn't even address the challenge. So I stopped, and they said, "How come you don't participate?" I said, "Oh, I didn't make one for this one." And then one year, the person that won did the whole thing on an embroidery machine. So I was like, "Yeah." So, and that was just my kind of my personal thing. So I said, "I'm not entering any more shows where the ribbon is given on a popularity basis." And then also that was a modern guild with a modern exhibit, and most of the people who came to the show, because everything else except for the SAGWA exhibit that travels, and then my guild, Bloomington Normal, travels with the Sewing Expo, but everything else was traditional. So these were actually traditional quilters who were judging modern quilts, and they didn't know what the modern categories were. They didn't understand what the modern aesthetic is, because I belong to a traditional quilt guild, and they think my quilts are crazy. Okay. It's like when I show my quilts, you know how they show your quilts and they go, oh, oh, oh. When I show my quilts, they go, oh.
You need to show us your quilts. We'll go woo woo, I promise.
Because I had an Irene Roderick quilt class, and I did, and the thing, if you know Irene Roderick's work, you know that a traditional quilter thinks that is crazy. So it really depends. That's why you have to read the rules so carefully, because Houston calls modern quilts abstract quilts. Okay. Abstract quilts to me, they're SAGWA. Those are SAGWA quilts. Okay. I belonged to SAGWA for a while, but I can't drive over to St. Pete. And especially due to their $110 now. But it's really important to look at who the past winners were in the categories. Okay. And they're all available on all of the websites. On the websites for the Houston Festival, for the International Quilt Festival, for the AQS shows, all of them are, and it's very, very, very specific, because up until recently, you could not have a long armor quilt your quilt. The quilt had to be done entirely by the quilter. Okay. Because one of my friends who does Civil War quilts and hand quilts them, she had won, and then they found out that her friend long-armed it, and they took her ribbon away.
So if she had a long-armed, it would have been fine?
Yes. Yeah.
If she did the long arming. Okay.
Yeah, but they've changed the rules now. They've changed the rules now. Like you said, things change. So it's really important to understand the show that you're entering. What do they think is a good quilt? Because you can't put your crazy modern quilt in a traditional show. It's just not going to happen. Okay. But I am entering to level up my craft. That's why I'm doing it. I really entered QuiltCon because I said I want to see what the process is. And I had a learning experience, a big one. So because I didn't. So anyway, but that's my thought.
That was a big controversy. Again, going back to in the Great Quilt Revival, where shows started having, when a lot of long arm quilters got involved, and I would go and I would see Best in Show, and the maker didn't quilt it herself.
Yeah,
I was always a little like, if it's professionally quilted, do I want to, or what?
Right.
Yes, it's beautiful, but I mean, I have imposter syndrome too, even after quilting for 30 years, Shirley. There's times when I just kind of go, like, do I even know what I'm doing? And I had a store I've taught, I published patterns. I have my credentials, but there's always a part of me that feels like I'm not legit for some reason. And I ignore that part and just do what I want anyway. But yeah, it was kind of like I started making my own quilts and quilting them and binding them. So when I opened my shop and somebody said, "Did you make that?" I could just say yes. And I didn't have to explain, blah, 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 blah. So there was a lot of controversy, even about the categories. Yeah. Then they started having categories for like new quilters, like somebody's first quilt or first entry. And then it was size requirements. And then it got to the point where there were so many categories, it was a little mind-boggling, to be honest, because where do you even enter it? And then you don't want to get negative feedback necessarily. So it just became kind of like over-regulated, if you will. But
well, Shirley, you mentioned the embroidery quilt.
Yeah.
I remember when machine embroidery, home machine embroidery.
This is what that was. Machine. It was not hand.
I remember back in the day when it was brand new, and it was a quilt show in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And nobody knew how to react to it because it was I can't remember if it was a White House in the middle, but there were ovals of all the presidents around it, and they were all done by machine embroidery. That quilt got more attention than it deserved
Yeah.
because, yes, it was lovely, but there were these magnificent hand-pieced, hand-quilted quilts that were not getting the attention that they should.
Right. Because you just turn an embroidery machine on and walk away.
Right. So, it has, I think, I love it when there's even though you don't, when there's a viewer choice, because that might be the quilt. Yes, in the case of the one you mentioned, maybe it was yellow, but it might bring a new quilter in.
But no, that's not what I meant about I didn't like viewer's choice, because I think all shows have a viewer's choice category.
Mhm.
But if this was one where we had a table and there was a first, second, and third prize.
Oh,
And yeah, and it was all viewer's choice. That was what I was talking about.
oh,
Yeah.
that I
Yeah,
have
yeah.
not seen that done. Yeah.
Yeah, but this was just the sewing, the sewing and something expo, the sewing and quilting expo that travels.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then when a guild has a table, you can do whatever you want. So they
Okay.
put the challenge up and they vote, and that kind of viewer's choice. But that's the only thing. I mean, it wasn't a show ribbon.
Oh,
Okay.
I did get a show ribbon as a viewer's choice
Yeah,
because a
but
guild,
that's different. That's a different thing.
but the outcome of that was it was a guild that I was in, and they were doing a display of Raggedy in 2015.
I think I saw your quilt because I remember that exhibit.
This is a doll.
Yeah.
They had a table of Raggedy Ann dolls,
Oh, okay.
and I made mine. I refer to her as Annie with an attitude. The woman who was curating the display had a lot of difficulty when I arrived with it. I'll turn around because I promised Bob I'd do this. There's
Aw,
complete with her shoes, her
She's
bracelet,
cute.
and her
She's-
beads.
yeah.
She's adorable.
But she got viewer's choice. And like I said, the woman who was curating it put her as far back as she could and on the display. And when I brought her, she kept saying, "Oh, oh,
Yeah.
And she tried to figure out what to do with it.
Yeah.
So since Anita said the word curator, here's my next question for y'all. We have to come up with a dream panel. Let's say we're about to curate a show and we have to figure out who's going to be curating this show. It's up to us. We can pick anybody we want. Do we choose 5 master quilters? Or do we choose 5 art critics, historians? And why? Why do we choose who we choose? What's the thinking behind who we want to curate this show that we're going to do?
What type of historians did you say?
An art critic / historian, somebody who
Art
maybe
critic.
isn't necessarily a quilter themselves, but might be somebody who writes about art or
Oh,
criticizes art
wouldn't
in
that depend?
other venues.
I guess that would depend on the type of show. I mean, what if it's a show for traditional quilters, then I wouldn't put them in there. But if it was a show for maybe modern and more artsy, kind of out of the box type things,
Mm.
I would look at the artsy people. But if it's more of the traditional definition of quilting and quilts, that's a hard one.
I think I'd put them all there, a little bit of each.
Well, I would do that would be
Let
ideal, but
them-
if I don't have a choice and I had to
You
choose
mean
between the
you
two,
could only choose one.
No, we can do whatever we want. It's our show.
oh, then let's split them up, Anita.
Well, I would say that again, it depends on the name of the show, because I think that all shows should have an artist, not necessarily an art historian. but an artist. Because in my opinion, quilting, even very traditional quilting, is an art form.
Absolutely.
It
And
is.
and I think that there should be someone there who really understands design principles and design aesthetics, and it's not hung up just on accordion seams and shadowing and stuff like that, because then you do miss the real wow. Because I went to a quilt show once when I first started quilting, because I haven't been quilting really a long time, and I had a lot of illness, so I had breaks. I went to a quilt show one time, and there were some beautifully executed quilts at that show. And I told my friend when we got in the car to leave, I said, I have never seen so many beautifully executed, boring quilts in my life. Because they were not, there was zero wow. I am an artist. Okay. I mean, I'm not a, real wonderful, realistic artist, but, I like to paint, sculpt, all of that. So I believe that a quilt should have a wow factor. Even my friend that does Civil War bride, I mean, her quilts are wow, and they ain't my type of quilts.
Right.
So I think there ought to be an artist on it. I think it ought not be, as long as it's not somebody who's hung up on the old school stuff.
I think the artist would bring, because you know how when you do those quilts and you're looking at the combination of colors that they put together, because I know I've gone to shows and going, I would have never put those two colors together. Look how they blended them so perfectly with the different patterns and stuff. And it turns out beautiful. And so an art person that's into art could see that and be able to go, oh yes, I like how they married those colors together, and how this pattern over here complements this pattern over here. So that's another, way to look at it.
If I was curating
a curator like that would look at the entire display area and be able to bring more of that wow factor just by which quilts were hanging next to each other.
I was contacted by the somebody from the Alabama State Council of the Arts, and there's never been any funding or event in my county, Russell County, to do with quilting. So I got put together with this lady. I'm going to talk to her next week. So for people like the general public, say we've never had a quilt show here, and we do have a guild here, so we have had one, but let's say we never did. My dream show would be sort of like the history of quilting, in that traditional quilts, like say 25% traditional, 25% art quilts, 25% modern, and 25% message quilts, because that's a category that has blown up in the last few years since George Floyd, and even before that, to where, I mean, the things I see are shocking, enlightening, eye-opening, and just amazing. Whereas a traditional quilt from the 1970s might look at that and go, that's not a quilt, But I would love to see the progression. That's the word I was trying to think. Progression of how far we've come since everybody was making Americana quilts. But, all right, moving along, ladies. Where are we? Here we go. Well, we sort of touched on this a little bit. Is it fair for a judge to dismiss a technically flawed quilt if its message is groundbreaking? And then the next question after that is the public vote just a popularity contest?
I will say something about, and I thought about that. The second question, part of that question, is it a popularity? I think it can be, depending on the size of the show and who knows who and whatever. If they know who did the quilt and all that, there's room for that. But there's always room for that in any type of competition, if it's set up that way. So that's just something you have to think about. I like that you said that the names aren't on the quilts and you can't see it, but if the people know the person and know their work, and they all get together and bring everybody they know and their family in there to vote for them, that could be an issue, be unfair.
Well, that actually came up for me a little bit in a show. I knew that my friend quilted these couple of quilts that were in the show, even though it was covered up. But I knew the pattern. I sold the lady the fabric. And I looked at it, so I had to recuse myself because I said, well, it's not fair. I mean,
Yeah.
I know who made it, I know who quilted it, and I know who helped her pick all the fabrics. So I'm not in a position to judge, which is another good point. We had 3 judges.
Mm-hmm.
So you get 3 different viewpoints, 3 different point evaluation systems. But if something like that comes up and I feel I can't judge it, but my partner can, then she can then judge that quilt and I can just move on to the next one.
Uh-huh.
And that's a problem that sometimes happens often with local guilds doing a quilt show,
Mm-hmm.
because it depends. If they've brought in judges outside of their guild, it's a better chance of the judging to be a little bit more equal.
Right.
Less
That,
bias.
you know,
Mhm.
certainly not as biased.
Mhm.
Judging is difficult.
Well, I really think it still goes back to old school and open mind, because here in the Tampa area, and not just Tampa, but even kind of the surrounding outlying areas, there's a Strawberry Festival, there's a Kumquat Festival. I have no idea who the judges are, but when I look at who the quilts that win the ribbons, my grandmother was quilted in Texas, and she was an award-winning quilter. I have a quilt that's made up all of her blue ribbons. They have since faded to pink because she was born in 1883.
Oh,
but
wow.
but it depends on who the judges are, because sometimes a judge is stuck on a style and a kind of and if in the smaller shows, I'm not talking about the the Houston quilt festivals and the Birmingham and QuiltCon and all of that, because they have things in place to don't get in the way of that. But the smaller shows where a lot of people start entering shows, sometimes they get discouraged because they have quilts that are really special and should get some kind of recognition, but the judges are kind of stuck on their thing. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is just my opinion,
No,
I
Shirley, you bring up a good point. And actually, in the chat, somebody had said, "Isn't all judging subjective?" My answer to that was, to some degree, absolutely. But if you're trained or experienced in judging, you do have a certain set of guidelines that you tend to follow. So it's not like your case that you brought up before, where I walked into a room and I go, well, I just don't like yellow. But the quilt is awesome, or it has an awesome message. It's like, I don't have to like yellow to appreciate what that quilt maker did and what they accomplished. And I try to look at it with an unbiased eye, maybe technically to some degree, because I am judging, but also to what was the intent. Again, going back to message quilts. If I walk by a quilt and I start crying, that's a winner. I'm not looking at her binding and the corners to see how sharp they are, or her stitch length. I don't care. It did its job as that quilt was intended to do.
Did you see the thing in the chat? Someone who was watching posted about Faith Ringgold's quilt. Yeah. And, you look at the, my last name is Petaway. You look at the Petaway quilts in G Speed.
Mhm.
That's right.
The first time I saw them, I had heard my grandmother mention some of these names, but I wasn't paying attention to any quilting stuff. I wanted a pastel blanket with a satin binding, So, but I looked at those quilts and they were kind of crooked in some places.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I had been, when I started out when I decided I wanted to quilt, I was looking at the ones that were, the flying geese that was straight. I evolved from that. But so, Harriet Powers quilt, it's not a bunch of stuff in a line and, so, it's there. I don't think that anything is the same. I think it needs to be like, when I read the rules, I just read the rules for the Birmingham show. And when I looked at the rules for the Houston show, it's 14 pages. So yeah, I was like, okay. Okay. So it's like, if the person paid attention to the type of show that they were entering with the big shows, then yeah, The judges should be somewhere in that world. If it's a local show, then, okay, it's okay. So I don't know. It's not clear because it's art. It's like I can do a painting. My daughters are artists. They're fine artists. And you look at my stuff and it looks like, okay, is she in the fourth grade or the sixth grade? Okay. But I have a good sense of color. So it just depends on what the assignment was. If you enter a category and the category is modern traditionalism, what did you change about a traditional quilt? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you take something that looks like a pattern with a different color, that ain't a change. So I think it's not rigid. The more it becomes rigid, the more it moves away from being art.
So you brought up another good point. We did one of the Quilt Africa challenges that we did was a Christmas quilt. And it was a traditional pattern from an American designer, very traditional actually, but most of us use Uncut Fabrics in 75% of the quilt, and then maybe like a solid background or something. So then, is that a traditional quilt? Is it a modern quilt? Is it a hybrid because we've melded the two? I think any art form needs to be organic. That's one of the challenges of the judging. If you are so locked into this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong,
Right.
you
Yeah.
are not allowing the actual art to speak.
Right.
Or the
I
person
got started
who
in quilting
created
because,
it to come out.
Right.
well, we started quilting, Jim and I, because we had quilts from his great-grandmother from Troy, Alabama, which is across the state from Gee's Bend. They were utility quilts. Nobody put them in a show. Nobody showed them. They just made them because they had to make them.
Right.
Some of them, I say, they're so ugly, they're pretty because some of the fabrics have faded. So it might be orange, then becomes pink, maybe. The blocks everything was cut on the bias, so they're kind of wonky, but they're so beautiful to me. So that inspired me for a 30-year career in quilting. So it did its job. It inspired me to want to make quilts, gave me the appreciation of it. So I think in judging, you always have to have that thought of this is art. My field of expertise, my prejudices are going to, by nature, narrow my view.
Yep.
So I have to take that into account and then go, like Shirley was saying, based on the show, based on the rules, what is the intent, and try to look at the whole picture instead of saying, well, I don't like yellow.
Right.
I'm going to use that. I love that. I'm actually going to use that on a couple of friends of mine. I'm just going to say,
Well, I challenged myself. I forgot because I watch a lot of Zooms and I watch textile talks, and they said, because I'm trying to grow as a quilter, and they said, if you don't like a color, you need to start using that color. So for years, I despised brown. And I started making a whole bunch of brown stuff. I changed my mind about brown, and it kind of released something in me.
I did that with pink
Did
because I guess as a guy, I'm not drawn to pink and purple, maybe naturally, but I was like, well, that's silly. I mean, they're fine colors. So I made myself use them, and it's still not my favorite color, but
No.
it was a growth
my
experience.
biggest challenge is imposter syndrome, because when I started quilting, imposter syndrome. When I started quilting, they had all the great machines. I had a little $35 thrift shop, Singer Quantum. I said, well, I can make clothes, but and I made my first quilt, and I thought I could make a quilt, and it was terrible. So I started taking classes. And now I'm in love with it. I got this big old room, as you can see, full of fabric.
You do.
Yeah. I turned a bedroom into a studio.
There you go.
And then I have a foyer that's my art foyer. Okay.
There you go. I was told by one of our Quilt Africa sisters that I need to share my quilts, and regardless of my opinion about them, good, bad, or otherwise. So every time I finish something, I put it on Facebook now.
And
I won't say who it was.
has.
She really encouraged me. She was just like, you are not, it's like that expression, other people's opinion of you is none of your business.
Right.
If I create something, it's my baby. I created it. I love it. I'm going to share it with people.
Unless they like it, then it's my business.
Yeah, then it's fine. I send them money. No.
Yeah.
So what else do we have to say about judging quilt shows? Has anybody had any? We talked a little about good, bad experiences. Or Barbara, do you have any questions about any of the criteria or things that we've discussed a little bit?
No, well, no, I'm glad that you read off the rules that you had, and I had did a little bit, looked at it myself, and I kind of agree with Shirley, because like I said, now I'm looking at my quilts a little differently, because these are things I wouldn't even thought to look at when I'm putting them together, and I'm real self-conscious about my quilts. I always think they are not good enough. They're not, and my big brother there always tells me yes they are, and my husband tells me yes they are. I mean, he, like they're good. And so I'm real critical of myself. I see everyone else and I go, oh, that's beautiful. And I go to the shows and I look at the techniques, not being a judge myself, but I look at the techniques, I look at how they stitch it, I'm looking at, how they, all these different ways, the modern quilts and even the traditional quilts. And how I started quilting was similar to most of you guys. I had an old quilt in Alabama that I loved to death. I wish I had have kept it, but I didn't know to keep it as a kid and a teenager. You don't know those things. But I love that quilt until the batting came out, and it was that old thick batting, fluffy batting, and I always had that love and just never had the time to quilt. I sewed out of necessity. I made my clothes and little different things, so I knew how to sew, but I never had the time to sit down and quilt until after kids get grown and you can get them out and you can have some focus time. And I just fell in love with them. But I've always been real critical of my own work, and so that little contest that I got kind of pushed into going into was like the first step, and I was really proud of this little gold medal, but
Yeah.
I was really proud of it as the first time I've ever done something. I did notice something, and I probably should have just went away. So, my quilt is pretty big. It's like a huge quilt. It was on display. And as people were coming in, setting up early, so the lady comes in and she's setting up her little thing, and she has her t-shirt quilt. So she's on the table and she's folding hers. Mine was hanging because Steve bought a hanger and put it together at the place to hang it because he wanted to encourage me and look at my wife, she's did this. So this quilt is like right there, huge. The table's there, and so she's folding up her t-shirt quilts and she's looking over at my quilt, like, slant out, like, and I'm like, oh wow, I shouldn't be here. I don't want to see her do that. Because it was almost like, kind of thing. I was like, wow, and I was going to compliment her t-shirt quilt because I've never done a t-shirt quilt. And so I decided I'm not saying a word
Yeah.
to that. It's like, it's not. Shut up, Barb. Keep it to yourself.
You're
So,
so nice. You're so nice. I need to talk to you though.
oh. But yeah, and so that was a learning experience. It pushed me out my comfort zone, but I'm glad I did it because it
Right.
kind of opened the door to seeing something different. And also
Well,
made me look at my quilts a little better.
Enter, because I never would have entered, but we had a 2-guild challenge, and those 2 guilds, those people enter and win. And the person that judged the quilts was the quilt show juror. And so I watched when they announced the winners, and I was the only reason I watched because I knew, I said, oh, my little quilt ain't gonna win nothing. I know that. I said, but I'm gonna see what the juror, this way I get to hear what they think. So I had my little notepad out, and they came up with the 3rd prize. And so I wrote down everything she said, why she picked her as 3rd prize. Then the 2nd prize winner came up, and I froze. It was my quilt. And I was like, is this a mistake? And that gave me the confidence because she is a quilt conjurer. She's one of the people that decide whose quilt gets in.
Wow.
She's not a judge. She's a juror because they have the juror first.
Right.
And then then you send the quilt in, and then they pick the one that wins the category and the best of show and all that. But when she said that, I said, well, maybe I don't really suck as bad as I think, because I always thought everything because the 2 guilds that I'm in, those people win everything. The quilts travel, they're in museums, all of that. So I knew I wasn't as good as them. And my imposter syndrome was just choking me to death. And then I still backed up and wasn't going to enter. and I was on our Thursday night sip and sew, and so everybody that was on the sip and sew was entering a quilt. And I said, "Oh,
Oh,
and
we were on probably the same sip and sew then.
yeah, this was no, this was South Florida Modern Guild."
Oh,
So
another one. Okay.
I said, "Oh," and they said, "Well, Shirley, are you in that quilt?" I said, "Well," I said, "I got two, but I don't." And so they said, show us." And they said, "No, you got it." I said, "But see this little part on the binding?" They said, "Enter it." And then I decided my win was going to be going through the submission process. And I would know what it was like. And I did learn something because I wrote this long artist statement and then found out it only had to be 75 words. So that was a learning experience too. So I had my friend who got juried in the Paducah. I said, I read it to her and she talked about it. And then I got ready to submit. I was like, oh, I got to eliminate some stuff here.
So
But it was felt so good to hit that button and to say, your submission for Serengeti Sunrise Sunset has been accepted. Your submission. And I know that I'm not going to be juried in there. I know that. But I have a sketchbook full of original designs, and I am working now, and I'm going to enter 3 quilts in QuiltCon next year. I'm going to enter the garden. I'm going to enter the Garden of Quilts in Salt Lake, and I'm going to enter Birmingham, and I'm going to enter Houston, and I'm going to enter Paducah. Okay. I may not get in any of them, but it is a leveling up process. So Barbara, enter, and don't even say, well, I got to start little. Where did I start? I didn't enter no other quilts. The first show I in, that's the biggest show in modern quilting. QuiltCon, that's the big show.
Yeah, that's one of the big ones. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the Academy Awards. I wasn't doing a little play at the neighborhood.
You have to start somewhere.
And I said, I'm going to tell this story, and then I'll stop talking because I was worried about this, but I'm talking. My husband and I used to run races, 5Ks. He was an Olympic caliber athlete, but he got hurt. Me, I was just doing it for exercise. So when we moved to Florida, we entered this little 5K, and I was the middle of the pack runner, and I knew that. He always came in first, second, or third, and always won his age group. So when they announced the awards, I won my age group and I got a trophy. And my husband came in second. But it turns out I was the only one that entered in my age group.
Oh.
So the moral of the story.
You never know.
The moral of the story, and I used to tell that story when I was a trainer, is sometimes to win, all you have to do is show up. Yep. But if you don't show up, you definitely won't win.
Absolutely. We have some questions and comments in the chat I would like to address. Carol's asking, any thoughts about fear of, we almost talked about this just now, any thoughts about fear of participating in competition? I said just do it.
Yes, absolutely do it. Every quilt that you see in a quilt show has been done by someone who had the guts to go forward.
Right.
Be scared and do it anyway. That is my motto.
And I had a quilt rejected from QuiltCon, actually. I did enter a quilt and it was rejected. And I was like, that's fine. I still like it.
But you can enter the same as long as it's within 3 years.
Right.
Because some of my guild members have had quilts rejected the first time and the second time and won a category or placed in a category.
Right. Somebody else is asking, how do you decide which shows to enter? That's a good question.
How much do you want to spend?
Well, that's part of it too. A lot of people don't realize, for the most part, you pay shipping. You have to send your quilt, you pay for that. And a lot of times there's an entry fee for jury shows that you also pay.
And there might be insurance.
There might be insurance.
No, QuiltCon is $20. It's only $20.
Oh, that's not bad. But that's a consideration.
Not bad.
How else do you decide? For me, it would be, do I feel like my work is a good fit for that show? If somebody was doing a retrospective Americana show, I wouldn't really have anything here that I would feel would be appropriate to enter. If somebody was doing a show featuring Uncut Fabrics, I've got a whole stack of quilts right in front of me I could enter. So I think it depends on the show and how you feel about being in that show. Ladies, what do y'all think?
I started small because somebody pushed me to, but I'm glad I did.
See.
It wasn't as intense as like QuiltCon and all that. I think I would have had a heart attack and a stroke just by going up there at that point, because my anxiety would have just took me off the top. But doing that, just that little small victory for me.
Mhm.
And it was more like, it wasn't even like a quilt show. It was a talent show. And they had quilting as a category. That quilting, embroidery, woodworking, crochet, needlework. They had all these categories. So to be, just because of encouragement and doing it, it really boosts my confidence in my work. Because someone else other than family and loved ones was looking at it. Strangers were looking at it,
Right.
and not just the people who love you and go, everything you do is perfect.
Yeah.
So it really boosted my confidence. And okay, maybe I'm not such a bad quilter, or maybe I am as good as someone else, or, it really did. So it's really
And here's a
encouraging.
question that I use on myself. If I walk into my room and I look at one of my quilts and I think if I didn't know that I made it and I was just looking at this, what would my reaction be? And most of the time it's like, I kind of like that. That's pretty good. So.
Mhm.
Are you guys familiar with Visions Textile Museums in San Diego?
No, ma'am.
No.
Yeah, well, it is I died to go there, and I finally got a chance to go. But it's a very small museum, but as a member, they have and you can join different museums and things, and they have member events, and they're cheap to enter, and you get really kind of good feedback, from those kinds of things, because especially if it's a member thing and somebody is going to judge it, they're going to give you some comments, and that like kind of helps you, because every time, like Barbara said, just to enter something is like, it's like, I told all my friends at first, I said I'm going to enter this and I'm not going to tell anybody, all my quilter friends, and they can all quilt better than me. But I didn't keep it to myself. You could probably guess from my personality, I didn't keep quiet. But enter more, and don't just enter the little ones. Enter the big ones. I see you got a Lone Star back there. Enter AQS. Enter one of the shows like Daytona, or because there's like several of them.
Right.
I forgot the names. It's not like just Houston, which is just the one. AQS has a number of them.
And Mancuso has a lot of shows as well.
Yeah.
Mancuso
Yeah.
shows throughout the country. Yeah. Well, we have a few minutes left. Let me see if there's anything else in the chat.
You'll never get over imposter syndrome, because I was with the quilt teacher last week, and she's known, I won't say what she's known for because they don't know who she is. And we were chatting before all the people that paid came on, and I was telling somebody, my guild members that I entered, and they said, "Oh, I'm glad you did because we pushed you." And then she started talking about imposter syndrome and how she still has it. And I was like, seeing this lady's quilts, and her quilts are awesome. So you're always going to have that.
You will. I'm doing a trunk show tomorrow at our local library, and I'm bringing with me about 20 quilts. And there's a part of me that wants to keep it behind the desk with me so I can show it to them, but they don't get too close. But now I'm kind of over that. It's like, well, that's foolish. Let them look at it, let them touch it, let them feel it, whatever, But I don't think
Your quilts I've seen your quilts are awesome.
I don't know what he's talking about.
Me either. What you talking about?
You guys.
I don't even know what he's just up there talking about.
Stop. Now my head won't fit in the screen, y'all. Any other thoughts? We have about 5 minutes left. Any other thoughts about
Anita? Because Shirley's been doing a lot of the talking. So
take it away, Anita. Take us out, Anita.
What? No, I was reading the questions. Does your local guild have a show?
Great.
As a guild member, you should be part of it.
Sometimes town historical societies, local libraries. I'm trying to think. Sometimes even going into schools and showing 4-H is another one in your community where sometimes you can get involved and just see what's going to state fairs.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah,
Right.
state fairs.
I forgot about
I didn't even think about that.
County fairs. Yeah, absolutely.
State or county fairs. It's always
okay, Barbara, we're going to do Birmingham together.
Oh, we are. Oh, Lord.
Are you talking about Birmingham, Alabama, or Birmingham,
No,
England?
no, England.
England.
That's a little different.
I was thinking Alabama and getting nervous, and she said England.
Well, see, I will just say,
Why not? Why not?
why not?
You know,
Why
the other
not?
thing
Exactly.
that
I am because I won the one. And now I'm going to the that was the state. So now I'm going to the region
okay.
in
Good.
competition.
And
So
what I have been doing recently is submitting quilts to museums for a call of entry, not
Yeah.
judged, but, and I've got,
okay.
Say a little bit more about that, Anita. I'm not sure.
There's a
everybody-
website called Calls for Entry, and it's for all over the
Yep.
world. Yeah.
and like Virginia Quilt Museum had a call for entries of specific
Yeah.
topics in Virginia. I'll have 2 quilts in the show that opens in July. You know,
Right.
20-inch specific, you know,
It's
specific.
as simple as you could just Google quilt
Uh-huh.
shows my area and see what pops up. You never know what will pop up. There might be things in the town next to yours that you're just not familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
Just go to callsforentry.com and they'll tell you what the criteria is
Mhm.
and if it's limited, because the Virginia show was in there.
Yeah.
I saw that. I used to live in Virginia.
My husband's a Virginian.
And I was in 2 shows that were male only. It was back a ways when there weren't that many male
Oh,
quilters.
yeah.
So
Oh,
a
wow.
couple of people put together one. And Shirley, talk about imposter syndrome. I had a quilt in a show and somebody wanted to buy it, and I almost talked them out of it. But then I was like, well, that's foolish. Like, let them buy it if they want to buy it. So that's a good. We are our own worst critics.
We are
part
so
with that.
bad.
I would not, I would not encourage everybody to be your own critic. Yes, I always want to improve and get better, and that technically, artistically, all of that, using different materials, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
But any criticism should be positive. Like, this is good, but maybe next time my corner will be a little bit neater, instead of I'm not a good quilter. Because we're all good quilters if we finish a quilt, in my opinion.
I'm putting the callforentry.org in the chat.
Thank you, Shirley.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
callforentry.org? Okay.
We have one more
With a group
question.
that is looking to consider doing a call for entry in New York State.
We're almost out of time. We have 2 more questions before we have to go. What do you think about shows that don't have insurance on our quilts? Would you enter?
No.
Oh, no.
No.
It depends if I'm right there with the quilt. I
Well,
don't know if I would mail my quilt off somewhere and they don't have any kind of insurance or
I
protection.
wouldn't as well. And the last
I
question.
never even thought about that, But
I think
then
they have to have
I'm a
insurance,
newbie,
though.
so I didn't know.
I'm not sure. Last question before we go, ladies. How to get into major museum? Just apply. Just find out what the rules are, what the requirements are, the time limit, whatever. Get all the information, and then just enter.
Well, you can start with Visions in San Diego, because they have it on their website and it's not restricted. You don't have to live in California.
Okay.
So, and it's a textile museum.
Okay.
And I've done, I don't know, probably 8 or 10 shows where I've lived in local galleries at colleges and regular galleries
Right.
over the years. It's amazing. We're very popular in February or March.
There you go.
Sorry, Bob.
Ladies,
I'm gonna put that in the
we're
chat.
gonna wrap it up.
Oh,
We are out of time. I want to thank you guys so much for participating. If people weren't able to make it today, I know they'll be able to view this on YouTube. So you all might become famous. You might get a lot of people asking for your emails, wanting to come to your house. We'll have to see how it plays out. But I just want to thank everybody so much for participating today. And I will see you all later. Have a great day, everybody.
It's been fun.
I put the
Thank you.
Visions
Nice
website
spending time
in
with
the
you.
chat. I
Thank
put
you,
Visions
Shirley.
in the chat. Okay.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Miriam, you can take us out? Left. Close the chat. And leave.
Okay, great job, everyone.